there's a saying in English, and I hope this translates fluently when the Japanese subtitles read this, but there's a saying in English, and it says that actions speak louder than words. So your actions are going to speak, and they're going to show a lot more than anything you could possibly say to explain yourself, right? So I really just believe that the actions or lack thereof, the lack of actions from the Japanese Box Commission, I think it did play a role in these guys potentially, and not potentially, in these guys losing their lives. And
がここにいるうちの本物のスクールスポーツのために行こうぜベイビーバン手の国は気をつけて、現実になることがありますからね。
all right, so we're going to go ahead and continue the long-standing tradition of covering Japanese boxing here on True School Sports. True School Sports, the #1 source for Japanese boxing in America. From an American, arigato gozaimasu. Thank you to everybody tuning in. And ayete yokata, nice to see everybody, tuning in, showing that love, that passion, and just that care that we all have for the sport of boxing. Now, honestly, this is probably one of the harder videos I've had to do because, as many of you guys know, I've gone to Japan 3 times, and I've spent over the last 2 years, I've spent significant amount of time in Japan. It hasn't been like a week or like, a couple weeks. It's literally, if you add up all the time I've spent in Japan, it's been damn near 6 months of my life. So no matter where I'm at in the world, I could be anywhere in America, I could be anywhere in the world, but there's always a good piece of me still left in Japan, even when I'm not physically there. So I love Japan, and I love Japanese boxing, and I love like just the journey of covering Japanese boxing. It's been so amazing, and I've met a lot of great people through the work we do here covering Japanese boxing here on True School Sports that I would have never met if I wasn't covering Japanese boxing. So it's very personal to me. So when I saw that Shigetoshi Kotari and Hiromasa Urawaka passed away on the same card, and the card took place at Corkin Hall, and I've been to Corkin Hall many times, probably like 6 or 7 times for fights. So I've been to the places where they fought. I've got personal friends that knew both of them, and I've seen messages of outpouring throughout the days of people that I know personally, mourning the loss of these guys. So it's really hitting home. And with Japanese boxing, it's just in the last, if we start from December 2023 to now, just in less than 2 calendar years, we've had Kazuki Anaguchi pass away in the Seiya Tsutsumi fight. We've had Jujiro Shigeoka get beat up so much so to the point where he almost wound up dying and had to retire from the sport. And his brother, Yudai Shigeoka, is retiring from his own career to take care of his brother. So that's serious. And then we have Hiromasa Urawaka and now Shigetoshi Kotari. Now they're both gone, and they both fall on the same card. I've never seen a card where 2 fighters on it, both pass away. So it raises the concerns, and it brings up the question of like, why does there seem to be so much deaths in Japanese boxing? I wanted to do this video earlier, but I really wanted to meditate on why are there so many deaths in Japanese boxing. I asked a lot of people that I know in Japan, and fighters and coaches and things like that, why they feel death is so prevalent in Japanese boxing. So I took into consideration some of the things they said, and I definitely have my own thoughts from being in different gyms and seeing sparring and going to fights and watching these fights. So that's what we're gonna try to unpack here, and to also talk about Kotari and Urakara, and just their fights as well, and show their guys their just due in their proper respect. So yeah, let's start with Shigetoshi Kotari, because when he passed away, I have a lot more friends that I know that knew him. So I feel like damn near I lost somebody, because I've been seeing people mourn his loss so much. And his brother came out on Twitter and had a long, lengthy thing about the JBC and some of the protocol and some of the things that they didn't do, that he feels contributed to his brother's death. So we'll talk about all that, as well as why I feel there are so many deaths in Japanese boxing. So we will start with Shigetoshi Kotari. His record as it reads now is as his final record, because he's not with us anymore. He's 8-2-2 with 5 knockouts. He didn't win any Japanese title or OBPF title. But funny enough, just last year in April, him and Hiromasa Urawaka actually fought. So the two guys that passed away on this card at Korakuen Hall fought at Korakuen Hall back in April last year. And Urawaka actually wound up stopping Kotari in the 6th round of their fight. So he's already been in some hellacious fights going into this fight that he had with Yamato Hata, which was for the OBPF title at 130 at super featherweight. But when you watch Kotari, he does have some moments where he shows himself to be a classy boxer, can counter punch, has good reflexes, but then he gets kind of caught. He will get caught out in that mid-range area. Sometimes his punches get a little wide. So in this fight with Yamato Hata, a lot of the times Yamato would just land really short punches and they were like heavy thudding shots and they'd be flush, and those accumulated throughout the fight, and those eventually wound up to him collapsing. But when you go back and you watch that fight, if you just watch the first 2 or 3 rounds, there was visible swelling, like not regular. It wasn't regular swelling. It was visible swelling on the face of Kotari, and that led me to believe, watching the fight, that there was something wrong with his. Maybe he had an injury or something that we didn't know about. But then it was later disclosed by his brother on Twitter that he had an injury that he had suffered in a previous fight from a headbutt. So he had broken some bones in his face. So that's why I feel like he swelled up a lot quicker. But yeah, Kotari, I think it was at the 9th or 10th round of the fight. The ringside physician went to go check on him, and they said he was fine, and they let him continue. But there was visible swelling from round 2. So if you're checking a guy around 9 or 10, you can imagine what the swelling looked like there. But this fight, along with Urawakawa's fight, which we'll get into in a second, it really raised a lot of questions about what are the protocols of the Japanese Boxing Commission, because again, there's too many deaths and too many just hellacious fights happening in Japan. And mind you, I mean, obviously I like these fights. It's part of the reason that I'm drawn to Japanese boxing, but at the same time, I respect the warrior spirit. I respect this built-in Bushido code that Japanese fighters seem to have, but at the same time, the trainers have to look after their fighters on a day-to-day basis in the gym when they're sparring. The JBC has to do a better job of looking after these guys before, during, and after the fights. And I just feel like there's been some gaps, and they haven't been at their best when it comes to that area. So, one thing I learned from this fight and from Kotari's brother is that apparently the JBC, Korakuen Hall, for those of you who've never been to Japan, Korakuen Hall, which is like the mecca of boxing in Japan, they do a lot of shows there, not just every month, but I'm talking about you can go to Korakuen Hall on any given week and sometimes see 2 and maybe even 3 boxing shows. So there's always fights going on at Korakuen Hall. So I feel like it's important to have good health protocols for fights at Korakuen Hall, probably more than anywhere else in Japan because they have so many fights there. But basically, look, what I learned is that the only way to carry a stretcher into Korakuen Hall is you got to carry it up a flight of stairs. And Korakuen Hall is part of this big building. It's near the Tokyo Dome, and it's on the 5th floor. So when you go to Korakuen Hall, you have to get into the elevator, and you got to go to I believe it's the 5th floor. And so if there's not a stretcher or anything like that, it won't fit in the elevator. Because the elevator is very small. Stretchers are very long. So I learned that recently. That was kind of crazy to think. And the JBC recently admitted that, or recently revealed that they don't have ambulances near the arena for non-world title fights. The ambulances are only on standby for world title fights, which means all these hellacious, wars we've seen at Korakuen Hall over the years, where these guys are getting beat the hell up, there was never an ambulance in place if these guys would get seriously hurt. So that's it's crazy that we went this long. We went through decades upon decades without the JBC having that in place. But I guess better late than never. But some lives have been lost because of that. So I hope they know that. But why do Japanese fighters? Why is there so many deaths in Japan? I've been trying to decode this and have my own opinion on this. Now I don't think there's one singular answer. I don't. I think it's a couple reasons. You know, first and foremost, I think it's the mentality of Japanese fighters. You know, like I said, there seems to be this built-in Bushido code, this death before dishonor Bushido code that every Japanese fighter has built into them. It's part of the culture, which I like. I mean, it makes for great fights, and it's one of the reasons I'm drawn to Japanese boxing, because these guys are willing to go out there and die on their shield rather than quit in a fight. So I respect that so much, and there's no problem with the fighters having that mentality. But the coaches and the trainers and the administrators of the Japanese Box Commission, they need to not have that mentality. And I feel like sometimes they have that mentality, so it's no good. The second reason why I feel like there's a lot of deaths in Japan is obviously a lack of defense. I cover a lot of Japanese fighters, and they have a lot of the same strengths and weaknesses. Now, I don't know if it's because Japanese boxing coaches don't know how to teach defense, or if it's because Japanese boxing coaches don't care for defense. I can tell you guys from my own experience that, and this is a personal story exclusive here on True School Sports. I know that when I was at Hachiochi Nakaya Boxing Gym, a gym that I love very much, it's one of my favorite gyms in the world. I was there because Angelo Leo, who's a good friend of mine, the IBF featherweight champion, he was doing some training there in preparation for his fight against Tomohiko Kameda. So we did part of camp in Tokyo at that gym. And while we were there, Jin Sasaki was getting ready to challenge for the world title against Brian Norman Jr. And for those of you who watched that fight, you know what kind of fight that was and how it ended. Jin Sasaki got put out and knocked out and had to get carried out on a stretcher. And a big reason why I felt that happened is because that gym, it's not like defense is not really in their thought process. Because I talked to one of the trainers there, and I told him, I said, hey man, you can't get hit by Brian Norman Jr. This is not a guy to be hit to get hit with flush punches by. So you got to be more sophisticated. You got to work on his boxing more. He can't be pulling straight out. He has to be defensively tight of this fight than he's been in his entire career. And when I told him that, all he started talking to me about was offense and power and the warrior spirit, which are all great things, but you need more than that. So I feel like it's not. I don't want to just say that's a problem exclusively to Hachiochi Nakaya Boxing Gym. That's a philosophy that I know a lot of coaches in Japan carry, and it's good for the fans' entertainment, but it's not good for the fighters, because the fighters don't have longevity. They get into these fights for little to no money for the OBPF and Japanese title, and they get years taken off their careers and their lives. And I just feel like they could do their fighters a lot better by, now look, if they can't teach these fighters defense because they don't have the know-how, okay, that's fine. None of us know everything. Then they got to start outsourcing these guys and taking them to the States and taking them and maybe getting coaches from America or other countries that can teach these Japanese fighters footwork and defense so that they can have prolonged careers, because these deaths will continue if things stay the same. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Another reason why I feel like so many deaths happen in Japan is because Japanese fighters are a lot smaller, so it's a lot of fighters from the featherweight class and below. So the fighters in the smaller weight categories are very good and skilled, but those fights tend to be more like wars of attrition. So it's a lot of punches. It's a slow beating, which if you've been in a boxing ring and you've sparred at any level, if you've taken a beating, there's a difference between somebody clipping you with heavy hands and hurting you with one shot, and there's a difference between people that just give you those slow beatings where it's a war of attrition. And so the second part, the latter, will take more out of you, and I feel like that's the case with a lot of Japanese fighters. It's the latter. It's the second that's taking a lot out of them. So there's that, and then I think the fourth part is it's the sparring culture, man. It's a sparring. I've been in a lot of Japanese gyms. I think I've been to at this point in time, I've been to about 15 or to 17 boxing gyms around Japan. So I've been to a lot of gyms. All over the country, from Tokyo to Osaka to Okoyama to Kyoto to Nagoya. I'm about as well versed on Japanese boxing gyms and gym culture as anybody not in Japan, and I can tell you guys that from what I've seen, that a lot of times Japanese sparring culture it's not even sparring. It's damn near like having a fight. Like the way you saw Shigetoshi Kotari fight Yamato Hata, and the way you saw you know, Hiromasa Urawaka fight in this fight when he got knocked out against Yoji Saito. You know, that's how them fights are. Jin Sasaki versus Brian Pillman Jr. That's how their sparring is a lot of the time. Kenshiro versus Seigo Yuriokui. That's how the sparring is. And so I think the trainers got to do a better job of not killing their fighters in sparring. Obviously, you want your fighters to spar hard, but you got to know when to pull them back. I feel like the mark of a great trainer is knowing when to pull your fighter back in camp so that he has the best pieces of himself ready for fight night and can give his best efforts and not be drained and leave the best parts of himself in the gym. And I just feel as though, you know, a lot of these Japanese gyms and trainers, they treat all the sparring like it's a fight. Now, there should be hard sparring, but not every sparring should be hard. Some sparring should be work on your defense, work on your jabs, work on your boxing skills. You know, you don't need not every fight, not every sparring session needs to be hard. And I feel like, you know, a lot of the coaches in Japan have the philosophy of, yo, and the fighters too. They have the philosophy of, yo, this is a fight, you know, and you know, I'm not gonna, you know, I know of fighters who have knocked out their own teammates in sparring, you know, because they're out there sparring hard and really just treating it like a fight. And you know, that's not healthy gym culture for the long term. You know, it will guarantee that fighters have a short shelf life. So I feel like these four factors, from the fighters' mentality to the JBC not looking out for them to you know, them being smaller fighters, and then sparring culture, I feel like all these things contributed to, you know, not just these deaths, but the death of Kazuki Anaguchi, the early retirement now of Jinjiro Shigeoka, which almost resulted in death. And what I'll say is this, guys, if you go and you read Shigetoshi Kotari's brother's tweets, and I'll leave it for you guys in the description because it's very long and there's a lot to unpack, but I'll highlight a couple things from the tweets. Kotari's brother stated here that basically, look, when he got to the medical room at Corkin Hall, that he told the ringside physician that, look, his head hurts and his eyes hurt, and that the JBC kind of was dragging their feet. They weren't really acting urgently. And it's crazy because they had to have the doctor, right, or call for an ambulance. And my thing is, why should the doctors have to call for an ambulance? An ambulance should already be on standby. You know, these fighters getting punished and their lives on the line. You know, you don't got 40 minutes and 30 minutes. You know, that 30 or 40 minutes can cost a life. And in this case, I feel like it did. And what's even crazier about it is the medical physician that was calling the ambulance on behalf of Kotari, she didn't even know what Kotari's name was. She asked the brother, "Hey, what's his name?" So that right there, it shows a lack of organization, right? From the JBC in this case, because that you should know, everyone on staff should know the names of the fighters. They should have medical records. They should have something on right there that lets them know, okay, this is Kotari, this is, you know, Inoue, this is Jin Sasaki, whoever, you know. But that's not what's happening. So it took the ambulance 40 minutes to arrive, and you know, that 40 minutes ultimately, you could say we'll never know, but like it's possible that 40 minutes could have cost Kotari his life. So it's like they gotta really tighten that shit up, because it's not healthy for boxers in Japan long term. So yeah, it's unfortunate that had to happen to Kotari. Rest in peace to him. You know, brave fighter, good fighter. Went out on his shield like a true warrior. You know, we will not make any disparaging remarks about him. But yeah, it's unfortunate that it happened to him. And then as far as the other fight, Hiromasa Urawaka, I watched his fight against Yoji Saito, which again, two very competitive fights on the same card. You know, from an entertainment standpoint, it delivered. You know, Urawaka, his final record reads is 10-4 with 7 KOs. So this is a guy in Urawaka that he could punch. He could punch. You know, just flawed defensively, and in this fight, his defense got him in trouble. And Saito took him to the deep waters and ultimately wound up drowning him in with his lack with his better stamina, better conditioning. And he once he knocked him out, he wasn't getting up, and you could see he was visibly distraught the minute he got knocked out and the fight was waved off. So yeah, he winds up passing away in a hellacious fight himself. And again, the JBC process of getting these guys treated was very, very slow. And how many more Japanese fighters are gonna have to die before they start doing the right things, man? They gotta really get this in order, because the impression I get, and listen, I know a lot of the media in Japan is scared to say this. I'm not scared to say this because I've looked into some of the most powerful people in Japanese boxing's eyes, and I don't have an ounce of fear in my heart. So I'll say this, and I don't care if it gets me in trouble. If they don't, I get the impression that there's a saying in English, and I hope this translates fluently when the Japanese subtitles read this, but there's a saying in English, and it says that actions speak louder than words. So your actions are going to speak, and they're going to show a lot more than anything you could possibly say to explain yourself, right? So I really just believe that the actions, or lack thereof, the lack of actions from the Japanese Box Commission, I think it did play a role in these guys potentially, and not potentially, in these guys losing their lives, and that the JBC doesn't care about the club show fighters. They may care about your Inoue. They might care about like Naoya Inoue. They may care about fighters like Kenshiro Taraji or Junta Nakatani. But as far as the fighters on the come up, the guys that are maybe in the top 15, but still fighting at Cork and Hall for little money for the Japanese title and the OBPF title, they don't care about those guys. And look, and it's really unfortunate, and I hope it's a big eye-opener. I hope that Japanese coaches and trainers, they stop being so rigid and they stop being so stubborn. The Japanese way is not the only way. It's a great way of fighting for aggression, but not every fight needs to be an aggressive fight. So I hope they start thinking outside the box, so that they can make their fighters and protect their fighters and extend their fighters' careers and make them be the best they can be. And I hope that this is an eye-opener for them as far as the sparring culture, because the punishment, the most punishment a fighter will take will actually not even be in the ring. It'll be day-to-day sparring. So it's the most important thing to manage that and manage it effectively. And look out after your fighters in the gym. And the trainers got to know the fighters better than the fighters know themselves. So it takes a really keen eye to see these things. That's why not everybody can just be a trainer, in my opinion. And yeah, hopefully things can change. But I'm gonna put this out there, and hopefully this video does well, and people come back and watch this, and hopefully my words can, cost, even if it's a 0.001% impact. Hopefully there's something good in the world. And rest in peace to the true warriors in Hiromasa Urawaka and Shigetoshi Kotari. These guys, they fought their hearts out. They did their part. It's just unfortunate that everyone around them, from the JBC to their coaches to everyone, just they failed them. They failed them. So it is what it is. It's part and parcel of the game. We all know, fighters know what comes with this life, and it's not always about the world titles and the pay-per-views and the endorsements and the fans cheering your name. That's the bright side of the game. But there's a dark side of the game. There's the possibility of death. That's why my friends in the fight game, like Angelo Leo, like Filip Herkovich, like my boy Ian Green, like a lot of these guys, when they go in the ring and they come back healthy, I'm always happy, because I want these guys to have great lives after boxing, and it's a blessing every time they come back healthy, win or lose. So I'm gonna leave it at that. I know it was a long video, but I had to get my thoughts out there on this. What do you guys think? What do you guys think is the #1 contributing factor to why fighters in Japan just keep dying over and over again? I think it's a lot to unpack, but I think the 4 things I highlighted are the reasons why. But either way, look, RIP to 2 true warriors, and may God rest their soul and comfort their families at this time. I'll leave it at that. Thank you for watching another video on the untouchable True School Sports Empire. For more great boxing content just like this, make sure you guys stay tuned and subscribe. You won't be disappointed.